I never imagined the worst day of my life would start with a simple phone call. The morning had been quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you heavy and unforgiving. Only weeks had passed since Mom and Dad had died, and I was still clinging to fragments of normalcy, trying desperately to hold myself together. The house felt emptier than ever, the rooms echoing with memories too painful to revisit. The faded curtains swayed gently from the breeze outside, casting uneven shadows on the cracked wooden floorboards. I was sitting alone in the living room, nursing a barely touched cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Then my phone rang, shattering the fragile calm. It was Carlos, my husband, calling from work. His voice was sharp, edgy, vibrating with an urgency I hadn't heard before. "Zilda," he said, the tension thick enough to choke me over the line. "I've got something here. From the inheritance lawyer." His words hung there, heavy and foreboding. My heart started pounding like a trapped bird in my chest as he continued. "There's something wrong. Something very wrong." When Carlos explained that the inheritance, everything that had been left to us by our parents, was suddenly missing, I felt the world tilt. The papers, he told me, bore only my brother's name. Every single document, every bank account, every asset. My brother, the person I once trusted and believed would stand by me, had taken it all. I sat there frozen, my hands trembling, the phone slipping slightly from my ear as if physically rejected. The room felt colder, the walls closing in. In the silence that followed, an unbearable weight pressed down on me, squeezing until I felt like I couldn't breathe. How could this be? How had he done this to me? How could he erase me from everything Mom and Dad had left behind without so much as a whisper, without a single warning? The stark realization washed over me like a freezing tide. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my parents anymore. No, this was worse. This was the sudden theft of my entire future, the foundation my family had worked a lifetime to build, ripped away beneath my feet without mercy. I sank onto the worn sofa, the fabric rough and unforgiving against my palms, my mind spinning in a chaotic storm. The familiar lines of the house blurred around me. The once comforting creak of the floor now sounded sinister, a mocking reminder of everything I had lost. The gentle tapping of rain against the window seemed to grow louder, like the ticking of a clock counting down the final moments before something irrevocably broken. Carlos's voice reached me again then, steady but strained. "We need to look at this carefully, Zilda. There has to be a mistake. Or something we don't understand yet." But even as he spoke, I felt a simmering dread nestling deep inside my chest, a cold certainty that this wasn't an accident, not at all. It was a calculated betrayal, gnawing at the very bones of our family, a darkness creeping silently where I least expected it. In that moment, as the shadows stretched long across the room and the first hints of nightfall draped over the house like a shroud, I knew the simple phone call was just the beginning. Nothing would ever be the same again. My brother and I had always been close, or at least that's what I believed for most of my life. As children, our bond was the kind that felt unbreakable. We shared everything, our worn-out toys, whispered secrets in the dark, and dreams about the future that felt limitless. I can still remember the way his laughter would echo through the small house, a bright sound that cut through the heavy silence of those early years. But as we grew older, something began to shift. The closeness faded, like the slow unraveling of a thread that once held us tightly together. It wasn't sudden, no dramatic fights or glaring betrayals that I could point to. Instead, it was a gradual distance that crept between us. His calls became less frequent. His visits died down to almost nothing. At first, I blamed busy schedules and the demands of adult life. After all, he had his own world to navigate. But the deeper the gap grew, the more I sensed something darker beneath the surface. Secretive glances, hushed phone conversations I wasn't meant to overhear, and an exhaustion in his eyes as if carrying a burden he wouldn't share. When Mom and Dad became ill, it was I who stepped forward. I visited every day, sitting by their bedside for hours, helping sort bills and making difficult health decisions. I watched their fragile forms with a protective gaze, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Meanwhile, my brother remained distant, absorbed in his own life. I reminded myself not to judge, tried to convince myself that maybe he was handling grief in his own way, but the silence stung. Even so, I trusted him. I believed that once Mom and Dad were gone, he would stand beside me as equal partner in their legacy. That was the promise, unspoken but understood. But trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered. Carlos, my husband, was the one constant in this storm. His steady presence kept me from unraveling completely. He urged me to stay calm when the first hints of trouble surfaced, but even in his calm, I saw the flicker of unease. When the call from the lawyer came, his face tightened at the edges, shadows pooling beneath his eyes. Together, we began the painstaking work of uncovering the truth, calling back offices to verify documents, scrutinizing signatures that looked too smooth, transfers that had appeared without explanation or my consent. With each new discovery, the room seemed to darken around me, closing in like the walls were whispering secrets meant to trap me in disbelief. The man I had grown up trusting, the brother who had once held my hand in the night, was no longer the familiar presence I thought I knew. He had become someone I barely recognized, a stranger wearing the same face, who had stolen everything I was rightfully owed. Sitting in the quiet house, clutching Carlos's hand for support, I felt a chill run through my veins that wasn't from the passing autumn wind rattling the window panes. It was the cold realization that the betrayal was closer than I ever dared to imagine, and that the life I had built around shared family ties was nothing but a fading illusion. Days slipped into nights, each one heavier than the last, wrapped in a restless silence that gnawed at my spirit. The house, once filled with warmth and echoes of laughter, now felt like a hollow shell, the shadows lengthening and curling in corners as if to swallow me whole. I could barely sleep, the ceiling above me stretching endlessly in the dark, pressing down like an unseen weight that smothered any hope of peace. Every creak of the old floorboards, every whisper of wind brushing the window panes, set my heart racing, twisting my thoughts into spirals of fear and confusion. Finally, I found the courage to call my brother. My voice trembled, barely steady enough to hold on to as I demanded answers, needing to grasp some thread of truth to hold on to amid the chaos. But the man on the other end, his voice cold, sharp as shards of broken glass, offered nothing but icy denial. No apologies, no explanations. Instead, he threatened me, warning that if I pushed any further, he would erase me completely from this chapter of our family's life. His words slid into me like poison, corrosive and cruel, sparking a fire of fury and despair that I tried to smother, but it burned relentlessly. Carlos, my husband and steadfast anchor in this storm, refused to let me drown in helplessness. Quietly, relentlessly, he began to unravel the web of lies my brother had spun around us. Piece by piece, Carlos uncovered the truth, a devastating pattern of forged signatures, manipulated wills, and cunning legal twists designed to cheat me out of everything. The very documents that should have protected my rightful inheritance had been twisted, corrupted in ways so calculated it made my skin crawl. The betrayal hit me like a brutal punch to the gut, an invisible force that knocked the breath from my lungs and left me staggering in disbelief. I kept asking myself over and over in the dark, how could someone I loved so deeply, someone who shared my blood and my childhood dreams, do this to me? The memories of our past, playing in the yard, sharing secrets under starlit skies, now felt like cruel illusions, ghosts haunting the ruins of what we once had. The house we all grew up in, the walls filled with a lifetime of stories, was sold without my knowledge, its rooms now silent and empty in a way that felt like a cruel erasure of my past. Even more horribly, the savings and investments that should have been ours, the safety net Mom and Dad worked so hard to build, were wiped clean, vanished into thin air as if swallowed by shadows. Every day, I felt myself growing smaller, fading like a forgotten story erased from the family history. The pain of isolation pressed down hard, heavy, and suffocating. I was alone, betrayed, and consumed by a rage that simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. But Carlos held me, steady and unyielding, whispering promises that we would fight, that we wouldn't give up. Still, with every layer we peeled back, the truth grew darker, more twisted and terrifying than I ever imagined. One gray, chilly afternoon, after weeks of unbearable silence and mounting dread, I finally found the courage to face him in person. The air was thick with tension, so heavy it felt almost suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in to witness what I had long avoided. The house where we met was draped in shadows. The fading light outside barely filtered through the grimy windows, casting long, harsh lines across the cracked tile floor. The familiar scent of dust and mildew hung in the stale air, mingling with the faint metallic tang of old paperwork. The ghosts of our past gathering in the corners of that room. He stood there, my brother, the man I had grown up trusting, the one I had believed would protect our family's honor and memories. Yet in his eyes, I saw no remorse, only a cold, steely resolve that cut sharper than any blade. When he finally met my gaze, his expression was unapologetic, almost defiant. The person I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I could barely recognize. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but every word landed like a stone thrown into a still pond, shattering everything I thought was true. "You were naive, Zilda," he said, the words chillingly calm. "I did what was necessary to secure my future." Those words hit me with a force that made my knees buckle. His confession wasn't just a betrayal of the inheritance. It was a betrayal of our entire shared history, our childhood, our parents' legacy. He confessed without hesitation that the house I'd dreamed of growing old in, the walls that held echoes of laughter and love, wasn't just sold. No, it had been cleverly hidden as part of a complex business deal he orchestrated in the shadows, a calculated move designed to sever my connection to everything I held dear. Each lie, every secret he had kept from me, was no accident. It was methodical, deliberate, the work of someone who had spent months weaving a web to erase me from the story of our family, to make me disappear without a trace. And the sharpest sting of all? The realization that my own brother no longer saw me as family. Instead, he regarded me as an enemy, a threat to be removed. Carlos, standing quietly beside me, was my anchor. His steady presence reminded me that I wasn't alone, even as the weight of that betrayal threatened to crush me. But deep inside, in that moment of cruel clarity, I understood that this wasn't simply a matter of money or property. It was far worse. It was the loss of the family I thought I still had, the severing of bonds I had believed were unbreakable. I looked at my brother one last time, longing for the person he once was, the brother who shared my dreams and fears. But he was gone, swallowed by shadows of greed and bitterness. That day marked the end of an era, an irreversible fracture that left me grasping at memories as they slipped through my fingers like smoke. The family I had cherished was no longer mine, and the emptiness it left echoed louder than any scream. Now, years later, the wound left by that betrayal still aches deep within me, like a faint but persistent throb beneath the surface of my skin. It's a scar that I carry every day, invisible to the world, but painfully real to me. The sting of losing the inheritance was raw and bitter, but losing my brother's trust, losing him completely, was a far graver pain. It wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about the fracture of family, the disappearance of a bond I once thought unbreakable. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see his face, the coldness in his eyes, the quiet cruelty behind his half-smile, and it unsettles me in ways words can't fully capture. The house, the accounts, the memories held in tangible things, they're gone, swept away by his greed. Yet amidst the wreckage, Carlos has been my light, steady, and unwavering. Together, we slowly built a new kind of family, one stitched not with blood or inheritance, but with the threads of honesty, love, and resilience. Our home is quiet now, but filled with something far more valuable than any possession: trust. He held my hand when I felt like I was falling apart, reminding me that I am not defined by what was taken from me, but by the strength with which I choose to stand back up. I learned something harsh and profound through all of this. The people closest to us are sometimes the ones capable of the deepest wounds. Betrayal, like a shadow, can cling so tightly it feels impossible to escape. But even so, we hold the power to decide who stays in our hearts and who must be left behind in the darkness. The pain doesn't vanish, some scars never do, but it changes shape, becoming less a prison and more a marker of survival. I don't know if forgiveness will ever come for him. The bitterness is a knot tangled deeply in my chest, but I refuse to let it consume my spirit or dictate the story of my life. Instead, I choose to carry a different kind of legacy, the one I want to leave behind. It's not money or land or possessions. It's resilience in the face of loss. It's kindness when the world feels cold and unwelcoming. It's the ability to find hope and light even when everything seems to be falling apart. Those were the lessons my parents meant to pass down, I think, even though their legacy was almost stolen right out from under me. And though the road has been dark and lonely at times, I am still here, standing, breathing, surviving. With Carlos beside me, I've learned that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes family is about who chooses to walk with you through the shadows, refusing to let you face the darkness alone.